one of the reactions of the NAACP in the response, in the immediate aftermath of Katrina, was to fight for those grants and their share of the recovery pie. But the bigger argument, it seems, never really got made.
Well, the bigger argument is being made. I mean, in fact, the NAACP, we filed a lawsuit against HUD because for their diversion of $600 million from housing that was desperately needed for homeowners and renters to redevelop the Port of Gulfport. So then we are in the middle of the fight. Unfortunately, up until the transition of the administration, we did not have an administration that would listen or cared about our interests because they were doing the bidding for large corporations like the Bechtel's and other large corporations that had descended on the Mississippi Gulf Coast and Louisiana Gulf Coast, and these were the same companies that was in Iraq benefiting from the spoils of the war there.
James, how do you see the relationship between the economics and the sort of justice and race issues that we talk about in our culture today?
Yeah, well, there's clearly intermingled. One point I think I want to make just with respect to the recovery or the lack of a real recovery in the Gulf Coast, I think it's important to remember that it's not just a matter of the White House, that you've got 435 people in the House of Representatives, you've got 100 senators who effectively really have all kind of fallen down on the job. We could talk about the past a little bit, but a lot of those same folks are in office. And I think when you have folks who are black or brown, don't have to be black or brown, but certainly when they're black or brown and they're low income, their ability to be protected, to be advocated for by those inside the Beltway is a real concern, and it's been one for a long time. And of course, there's the intersection of race and class. So I think there's, again, we have a lot of the same people still in play.
Yeah.
The idea of effective representation
I mean, I'm all with you on the bold dreams and big victories and everything, but we're in a situation right now where we've done a lot of reporting of what's happened in Baltimore. We've done a lot of reporting on the Gulf Coast. We're looking at massive profits by some Wall Street banks today, miserable poverty still continuing, unemployment continuing, foreclosures by the million coming down this year, disproportionately on people of color, specifically African-American communities, and yet this economic crisis we're in seems to me exists in a different bubble than the racial justice and gender justice conversation. Aren't they the one and the same?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. The NAACP certainly sees it that way. We've been involved in this fight for a very long time. We sat down with Ben Bernanke 2 years
Chairman
ago.
Of the Fed.
Chairman of the Fed, over 2 years ago now, to talk to him about some of the trends we were seeing occurring. The African-American community, of course, becomes that canary in the mine shaft. That is, we feel it first. It hits us the hardest. We know what's going on. We can call it in many ways before it hits the rest of the country. We saw this happening. We sat down with them and said, look.
I'm not sure that's a positive that you saw it happening, because we needed to know as soon as we could.
And we said it. We said it. We testified before Congress. Barney Frank was just with the NAACP yesterday, the chairman of the Financial Services Committee, a good friend of ours, as a matter of fact. We sat down with Barney and said, Barney, here's what's going on. Barney said, I'm going to have a hearing. Mm-hmm. We had a hearing. We testified before that hearing, as a matter of fact. We raised these issues. Same thing we said to Bernanke. Look, we need a moratorium on foreclosures. What we're saying is that because of predatory lending practices going on throughout our country, African Americans are being steered into high-cost, subprime loans, early payment penalties, and other problems that are very well going to put them out of business.
Right.
They were giving loans to people that could not sustain them, as a matter of fact. They were going and talking to our elderly, targeting our elderly, saying, look, we know that the house is paid for. We know your husband's died and gone. We know that very well you're living on a little pension and some Social Security, but you need a new roof, and energy prices are skyrocketing. We'll put some new storm windows in for you and whatnot, and we'll give you a loan to do it. What they didn't tell them is that 4% was going to escalate to 6%, and then 8%, and then 10%. They didn't tell them they were going to drop their escrow at the end of 6 years. They'd have to also pay their insurance and also pay their taxes. They didn't tell them a $1,500 was going to go up.
I mean, we've had whistleblowers on this program from Wells Fargo.
We're talking about 2 years ago.
We targeted the black church intentionally. But coming back to you, James, I mean, you're working in Philly. You've also seen Baltimore. I mean, I think somebody needs to be running around with their hair on fire, not celebrating 100 years, if you don't mind me saying. Quickly, James.
Sure. No, I mean, I think, there's a time to celebrate, and that's great. But you're absolutely right. And I think Hilary's statement about black folks and lower income folks of color in general being the canary in the coal mine, it's absolutely right. And there are so many problems, whether it's who's uninsured, who has unequal health care, essentially paying the same level of insurance, whether it's, GM closing, and, there's a whole, understandable set of issues. You've got to handle that in a certain kind of way, but that disproportionately, in a very big way, affects black Americans. The ways in which race and economics play out is definitely something that it's hard to get our attention on, right? I mean, we have this idea of post-racial society, which is such fiction, and it has very, very real consequences. So
Derrick, you wanted to come in on this.
Right. Just going back to the financial situation, not only do we have the hearings, but the NAACP has a lawsuit against the 12 major banks in this country. So as we celebrate, we're also fighting. That lawsuit was led by the state Congress president out of Texas, who have a very strong position, and we've survived a motion for summary judgment. It ties around to the nominations of Sonia Sotomayor. We are positioned well now. We are in the fight of relevant issues that goes cross race and gender, and we're in the middle of that fight. That's what NAACP has always stood for. So we're going to celebrate the 100 years because it empowers us to understand that with all the obstacles that faced us before, we were able to overcome those obstacles, but with the understanding that the fight continues. And here are a list of things that we're doing currently. We're fighting the Department of HUD around unfair housing practices in Mississippi. We filed the lawsuit against the 12 banks who targeted African American communities, but when the money was almost drained there, they targeted the rest of America, which created the financial mess that we're in now. We are in the middle of those fights. So it's a celebration of 100 years, but it's a recognition that we need to continue to fight for another 100 years.